Okay. There we go. And with that, I believe we are now live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Mending Discussions on Wednesday. Now, today's a little bit of a different Wednesday because we have Canada Day that we are reflecting on today. I know for me, obviously, I'm very grateful for being in Canada. It's beautiful, and I think we have a lot of privileges being here. But um, how we came here is something that doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well with how the injustices against Indigenous people and people of color continue to impact Canadians here. And so, with that, for this mending discussion, I would like to welcome Lucas. Hi, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing so well. Thanks so much for having me. And I'm super excited to talk about mending and speak with you, Alicia.
Amazing. So, what are your thoughts on today then?
Well, I've been like sitting and also reflecting about Canada Day, like a lot of other people are. I find myself like kind of demonstrated by you, Alicia, drawing a distinction between being grateful and having pride. Because like when I think about like what pride is, right? It's like recognizing the good of something, right? And being like, I'm proud to be this. I'm proud to be blank. But when I think about Canadian history and like it being established through settler colonialism and at the expense of like Indigenous people, I don't see anything to be prideful in. But what I do think we can do is be grateful for like material goods that we have and allow us to like live well, but also recognize and not be grateful in what's happened in order for those material goods to be here for us. Yeah.
Okay, so we're here reflecting on where we're situated, which is the Mississauga Anishinaabe, and at the right at the end of the Otonabee River is where our center is located. And so, we are really grateful with our collaborations that we have with our community, with Niche Quinadat Anishinaabe Kwewe Service Circle, with Nogojuan Friendship Center, and all the First Nations around us. So so thank you for being here. Let's kind of go back to mending a little bit now. What made you want to get started with mending as a first time going around getting involved with this program, and now as being a facilitator?
Well, I first kind of like heard about mending while I was going through, I think it was my second dawn training. Jason actually spoke at one of our. Jason is a security at Trent University, and he's also a MENding facilitator. And he came and spoke to us about this kind of like up and starting MENding program about engaging men in ending gender-based violence and learning how to speak with other men. I thought that was so interesting because I was at that time like I was looking for an opportunity like to talk to men about being a man and about like what gender is actually in a kind of broader concept way. So I heard about it through Dawn Train. Yeah. And yeah. Sorry, would you be able to remind me what the question was?
No,
Did I
I was just
answer it?
asking you about like what got you started with mending and what made you want to get involved.
I think another reason why I wanted to get involved is because like after hearing about it from Jason, I recognized like the value that me learning alongside other men and people who aren't men about like being just like a better leader and like using power well would benefit like not only myself but like the people around me and my loved ones. Like it would allow me to be a better friend. It would allow me to be a better Dawn and a more supportive Dawn when I was in that role. Yeah, so I just recognized the value that it would give me to like do better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, what from the mending program really stood out to you, or what was one of the kind of, obviously there's a lot that you can take away from it, but what was one thing that you took away on a much deeper level?
Definitely like taking away from it that like being a man is a gendered thing, that like sometimes as men uh, I can forget that I lived a gendered life, and that's because I don't face like a lot of or I face kind of like different kinds of like social pressures, right? um, so like kind of talking to other men and like engaging in these conversations about this, like I'm reminded rather that like I live a gendered life, and I'm a benefactor of like a lot of things that tend to uphold men at the expense of people who aren't men. Yeah, so like it felt like a long-awaited like gender development. Yeah, like something I've been looking. Yeah.
So what was the male gender development that you reflected on or that impacted you?
I think as I was like going to Trent University and going to post-secondary school, I started asking myself like what I want to be, and what that would look like, and how do I become a good one of those things, right? Like I started talking about what my dreams and like aspirations were, and um, I started also coming across these questions of like, okay, what does like being a good man mean? Okay, and I think that also led me to like other answers, and kind of like judging on like what I thought being a good man was at the time. I started having these questions, and like while I was having these questions, and at the beginning of university, it helped me guide what like disciplines in the university I was looking to. Like at the time I went into university, I thought that in order to be a good man, I had to be smart, and I had to be able to beat people in the arena of discourse and argue really well. So that's why I think that's partly one of the reasons why I got into philosophy. Um, yeah. So like in fewer words, like it was just kind of like a realization of a process that was already happening, and then wanting to take control of it instead of just following whatever vague notions I found or felt good at the time, and really like taking control of my own gender development. Yeah.
So what did you learn about your gender development then in mending, and also thinking about gender-based sexual violence as well?
I learned how impactful having male leaders and like male like people to look up to, right? Like, and I realized that like when I hold these positions of power, like at the time, like in my dawning role, and also now in like my MENding facilitator role, um, people look up to me, and people are like willing and ready to learn from me, and I need to recognize that like that people are doing that, and that means I need to be ready to have conversations with this. Yeah. So I think one of the things that like I learned was that like we can't do this alone. Gender development isn't something that you do by yourself, reading lots of books. It's something that you talk about, and you engage in other people. You engage in conversations with other people about, oftentimes tough conversations, and sometimes you have to be uncomfortable. Yeah.
So you were talking about male leadership and male roles. Now, is that with other males and the privilege that you have speaking with other males, or is that really with all populations that you have? And I think, you know, Stu was talking about it on the last episode, saying that, you know, is confronting a man really something that people feel safe doing?
Wow. Like, I definitely have influence over like people who aren't just men, but like I feel like there's, and I think that that's like the reason, and something that we like talk about a lot in the MENding program, and like when we talk about male allyship groups, is that like there's just like there's a connection that happens when men are teaching men, and men are talking about these things with other men. Like we often talk about like it's almost like a different learning process that happens. And I think a part of the reason that is. Kind of also what Stu was talking about in the last MENding connection session was that like it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to like stop doing like almost like kind of implicit competitions with other men. Yeah.
That's an interesting way.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, that's an interesting way to put it, like implicit competitions. And you talked about tough conversations. What kind of tough conversations are you talking about when you are talking about having tough conversations with men? What are those conversations?
I think if I could put it in one phrase and then delve deeper in afterward, it's putting your whole self on the line. It's saying like, it's affirming that like you are this thing, and then being willing to talk about it, right? And then when you put yourself at stake, when you say, I'm a man, and then someone asks you, well, what does that mean? And then being a man is like a super fragile thing that like, oh, being a man is having a beard. And then this person says, okay, but what about men who don't have beards? And then you're like, oh no. What I was building and constructing to be what a man is isn't true, isn't useful, right? So it's the challenging part is putting yourself at stake in these conversations. And I think that's what it means to be vulnerable, and I think that's what it means to genuinely learn and take these topics to heart.
Mm-hmm. When you talk about putting yourself at stake and really your expectations as to what it means to be a man, where do you think all that comes from? And when do you think we make it implicit in our minds where it's just, that's just the way it is? So when does this start and how does it start?
I think it starts super early. Wow. And I think it starts with like we were talking about too, like people that we look up to and say, you are a man, right? And then what actions and attitudes they have, right? Because like as we're growing up and we have like male figures in our life, it could be our father, it could be our grandfather, it could be our uncle, and they engage in behaviors and tell you that like in order to be man, you need to do this, right? Or it could be making a sexist or misogynistic joke and inviting you to laugh, all right? And like then you start making these associations that like when I'm with my male figure, he does this, and this is what it means to be a man. So I think it starts incredibly early, and I think it starts with the working ideals that we look and are informed by like the male people in our life that we look up to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because if you talk about like the male role models, and I get that, because if I see someone wearing a t-shirt, for example, of a band that I really love, I'm going to connect with them instantly. Or I see someone that looks like me or talks like me, I think in my mind, okay, they have similar life experiences to me. They can relate to me on different levels. Therefore, they are someone that I have this implicit connection with. And I think that is definitely true, especially for men, right? If you look up to a guy that looks like you, that has a lot of friends, a lot of connections, they play a lot of sports, like you're going to want to be like them. And then when they say really inappropriate things like sexist jokes, and no one in that group questions it or talks about it or even thinks about it, then those types of jokes are okay. And that really contributes to a whole kind of continuum of harm that we are talking about with Stu as that like continuum, right? And so when you see someone that you look up to making these jokes or saying horrific statements and no one says anything, kind of implicitly you go, okay, well, like it's okay to say these things. It's okay to say to act this way, because that is what's going to garner me respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Because actually, that reminded me a lot of this book that we were kind of talking about before in previous MENding Social.
What's the book and who's it written by?
It's written by Mark Green, and it's called The Little Me Too Book for Men. And it is pretty little. It's what is it? It's less than 100 pages, and it's for how like short it is, it covers a lot, and it talks about a lot of really important things. The important thing that you were talking about that it reminded me was about like how men are kind of like pushed into silence when they're together, and a kind of male leader that that group is going to look up to says these kind of either misogynistic, homophobic, like bigoted remarks, right? And what I really liked in the book that it talked about is like how that action is kind of it's done in the presence of only men. Sometimes this is what we refer to as like locker room talk, right? And how it affects people who aren't men and women, despite it only being with men, because like as like Alicia was talking about, it always contributes to the consolidation of like gender norms, and also just like to those individual people as well, right? Like as you're talking about, they're going to start changing what they respect, because they're saying like, I want to be funny, and if all of these group of people just laugh at this joke, maybe this is something I need to value. Yeah.
Yeah, and like because I read that book too, and what I loved, it kind of went through the man box and what it means to be a man. And unfortunately, a lot of what it means to be a man, and we've had these kind of conversations, I know you have had these conversations as well, with people as young as grade 4 talking about what it means to be a man, all the way through 4, 5, 6, high school, college, university, etc. And like these expectations are so similar. We talk about the beard, the beer. You know, you come home to your wife, you grab a beer, and like to hear grade 7s just being like, yeah, that's what you do. You turn on the TV, and you know, you have these like expectations as to like what you need to do and who you need to be and look like and who you need to be married to. And so it like it puts you in this box of like, this is what your expectation is.
Yeah, and like I like, and that's why I think like, especially in media, like representation matters a lot. I know it's not like the be all and end all. Like I know it's a part of like the process of kind of like reverting and changing these kind of like gender norms and making them much more beneficial and less toxic. Yeah, but it also goes with like changing policy and changing structures. Yeah.
Stu was saying men have to use their social capital in a positive way to influence those conversations.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
tough. I think that's something that's so much easier said than done. When you're with a group of your friends, these are people that you care about, or teammates, or family, and you hear a fellow male say something inappropriate, it's really hard to disrupt those conversations. And as a man, maybe you can speak a little bit to that and how and why it's so tough to disrupt these inappropriate comments or jokes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's like they're like, it just being a group of friends poses a challenge, just because like maybe you care about this person in one way that you don't want to embarrass them in front of everyone, right? Maybe instead, and like maybe a solution would be to that is just like speaking with them afterward, right? But as a part of the MENding program, we talk about this. We talk about bystander intervention, right? And the kind of different principles and practices that we can apply to make sure that we enter into those instances to interrupt the violence that's happening. And we have to be calm, curious, supportive, and did I forget a C?
No, calm, curious, supportive. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
So
why do you think the embarrassment impacts men significantly more?
What, like, oh gosh, I think like it like the kind of words that are often like that I've like talked about, right? It's just like this kind of aversion to being vulnerable, right? And a part of that is what Stu was also talking about in the last session, was like this aversion of being wrong, right? And I think what that's connected to is what I've spoken about earlier, which is having a pillar of masculinity being intelligence, right? And if you're wrong, it means you're not smart, and then you're not a man. And then what? And then you scream because you want to be a man so much. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, like a lot of what mending is just kind of like, instead of becoming embarrassed, instead of becoming discomforted, it's like engaging these conversations where you are going to be wrong sometimes, and learning to, and this gets said a lot, like living in that discomfort, right? And that's where genuine transformative learning is going to be happening.
How do you learn to live in discomfort? Because none of us want to be
No.
uncomfortable. None of us want to acknowledge maybe something that we've done or said in our past that wasn't right or good to say. How do you manage that discomfort?
I think the biggest thing that I will say is trust. It's finding a group of people that you feel safe with and feeling that you can trust, right? It's finding those people that you can put your whole self uh, into not question, but it's people that you can offer your whole self to in conversations like this. And it's not easy, but it's finding those people.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like too, we try to find those people with our bros, right?
Yeah.
Like that we try to find those bros that we can connect with. And sometimes with those friends, you're still trying to dismantle those same like statements and questions that you're having about yourself that maybe they haven't even thought about. And so why is having these uncomfortable conversations important then?
Oh. Because like it's going to be beneficial for everyone. It's going to be beneficial for yourself. It's going to be beneficial for your friends who are also going to be having the same struggles and issues and questions. And it's going to be beneficial for your and everyone that you speak to and that you trust's loved ones, right? It's going to be beneficial for everyone to do this, to engage in these conversations, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
stop being a jerk, putting stock into better things that describe what being a good man is, right? Um, yeah, it's tough, but it's necessary.
Mm-hmm. And so I feel like mending kind of creates that space.
I'd say
And
so.
I know calling things a safe space, especially for a man, is like acknowledging that vulnerability. And these conversations are tough, and these conversations are conversations that the men may be thinking about and wanting to have, but may not feel safe even acknowledging it, or that there's kind of like that the safety in numbers, right? Like,
Mhm.
well, if the group thinks this way, then I should be okay with how the group is thinking and not try to divert from that.
Mhm. Oh, I think Parn took a really like good approach to um, like handling that kind of like aversion to call things safe spaces, right? And I think they acknowledged that like it takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of courage to kind of like step out of line, kind of challenge expectations uh, that are a lot easier to make, and be brave, which is why I think they talk about brave spaces instead of safe spaces.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so, Stu was just saying, if you can get just one friend to stop and think, that's one more friend that you can trust. Mm-hmm.
Like those are good friends, right? Like and I don't mean to like, this is of course like me saying this, but like the more like closer that you can feel with someone like who's a close friend like that, and having that like element of trust there, like that's just a deeper connection, right? Like that's lovely. That's not the superficial, and I don't mean to like call anyone out by saying this. It's not like the superficial hang out and drink a beer and talk about nothing once a week. It's like I'm involved in this person's personal development now. Like I'm a witness to them challenging themselves and growing. Like that's a pretty intimate. It's pretty lovely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so I think something fun that maybe we should announce now is that Lucas, you will actually be, you have become the MENding Program coordinator.
I am so excited to be in this new role. I hear so many words, but one word is excuse me. One thing I will say is that I'm so happy to be a part of this program because I know that it's necessary and I know that it's going to be like an agent for genuine, real change, and that um, I'm going to be learning along the way, along with everyone else who participates in the program, to have these really deep discussions and form like just a greater community of male leaders. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Stu's congratulating you. Sexual assault center Quinty's congratulating you. So,
Thank you, Stu.
what are your goals with the MENding program in the upcoming fiscal year? What are some of the directions that you want to take MENding besides worldwide? We'll do that.
Yeah. Short-term goals, I think, is accommodating what MENding used to be pre-COVID-19, which is like getting people together in a space and having 3-hour like sessions, very structured sessions, and kind of converting that online, right? Having like self-directed learning as well as conversations that we have with people, because I think the conversation element is super important and it needs to be adapted to meet the current needs of a global pandemic happening. Yeah, just doing more training the trainer sessions with and professional development opportunities with more leaders in different spaces. I know that we were talking about Alicia and other people at the center. I was talking about connecting with restaurants and bars as well as like barbershops. If you haven't seen the conversation with Brian and Alicia 2 weeks ago, I would highly recommend that. Yeah, and I think another pillar that we were also talking about is having like the not like arguably one of the most vulnerable conversations with men is like talking about doing harm and what to do after harm. So that is connecting with men and male identified people who have committed acts of gender-based violence and sexual violence, and learning how to move from there and move forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talk about how men on average for reported sexual assaults perpetrate 97% of that. And so how do we have a conversation with well, that's just 97% of reported, but how do we have a conversation with men who have done these acts, maybe like said a joke or an inappropriate statement, or maybe that they did something in their past because that was just what people did. And so it's going to be a very interesting space to navigate that with men in these conversations, right? It's
Yeah.
not easy to say like, hey, I've caused harm, and then how do you respond to that? How do you even begin that conversation? So I'm really excited to do you have any initial thoughts, or are you saving that for when we launch it?
My initial thought is just that like if people are coming to that program and wanting to talk about it and wanting to disclose that like they've done things that they aren't proud of, I think that's the best place to start, right? Because that's where genuine learning is going to happen. That's someone saying something's gone wrong and I don't want to do this anymore. That's someone making the ultimate disclosure. Like I think it's going to be super successful because we know that a lot more sexual and gender-based violence happens than what is reported, right? And this is going to be an avenue to reduce further harm. Like it's only going to be beneficial. I have a lot of hope for it.
Mm-hmm. And so what are some other thoughts and discussions that you were wanting to have today and to talk about and navigate through? Because I know there's so much with this program, and with you being a philosophy graduate, I guess you can say now.
I guess so, yeah.
Oh yes. that you took these conversations to like this really deep philosophical level that I think we were all on the ride for, but we all felt that as if we were on like the back of the roller coaster where we're just like hanging on and having everything. So yeah, what other kind of things did you want to go through?
Oh, uh, I also want to say I'm so sorry. Um,
Oh
like I, I've been like definitely like trying to work on like just being accessible in my like speaking. So I'm super sorry if I wasn't clear at any point. I need to work on that.
no, it's just no, it's a whole new way of thinking about the problem that we all witness, right?
Yeah, yeah. Um, One thing I was kind of like thinking about, and it's philosophy related. It's another book. It's another book that I got a pleasure of reading in my gender feminism and philosophy class called Down Girl by Kate Mann. It's a really recent book actually. I think 2015 or so, which is like I guess it's not too recent now, but it has really like topical things. It talks about current trends and examples of misogyny. That's the top. That's like the kind of topic of the book is describing what misogyny is and kind of looking at kind of colloquial or naive kind of conceptions of misogyny, and then like wanting to make a better definition of misogyny that is more useful. So the naive definition that Kate Mann talks about is misogyny being described as having a hatred of women in your heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that definition kind of breaks down and doesn't become useful for describing what misogyny is in like a broader sense of the term, because we know at the center that and something that we teach is like what matters is impact and not intent, right? People can make mistakes, but something wrong has clearly happened, right? You can do a misogyny without willing or trying to. So what Kate Mann kind of like talks about and really like boldens in that book is that misogyny is the policing and enforcing of gender norms, and is a part of it's a part of like the supporting of like patriarchy and patriarchal systems by denigrating like women and uplifting men. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's another thing I wanted to.
Yeah, so what is that, so what is this I guess more realistic form of misogyny look like in this book then? Like what are the actions, like what is it to degrade women but uplift men? Like what does that look like?
Like I think an example that like we've already talked about is locker room talk, right? When you're in these spaces where men, most oftentimes after they've had a drink or two, start talking about, oh yeah, I want to share all my sexual conquests with you, and this is the only thing I want to talk about, and then making comments about like the body of like female coworkers, right? And then like that is an environment which is hostile to women, right? And that is where the misogyny is happening, right? It's not happening in the heart of that person, right? Because the person who's making that joke could be scared, could be like, if I don't make this joke, people are gonna think I'm manly enough, right? So it really puts focus onto the part where like the misogyny is happening and the perpetuation and enforcing of harmful gender stereotypes and gender roles is happening. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, so it's moving away from just like, well, it's still part of it, like
Yeah. Yeah.
where there's that genuine hate in your heart for women, and I think about like the incel movement,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but moving more into those, what I would even consider kind of like overt microaggressions. Like, oh, I'm just talking about me and my sexual conquest and who I did what to when and how the body looked. And yeah, it's just interesting to think of that as like a form of misogyny.
Yeah.
And I would almost like connect that to like patriarchy in a way, that like that is expected of you, like you are to have sex like with whatever whoever as much as you can. So yeah, that's a really interesting way of looking at it and bringing that intent versus impact into like what they're actually saying, right?
Yeah, yeah. It's just like a principle that just keeps becoming more and more correct to me. It's just the impact over intent idea. Like,
Mhm.
um, yeah, I love it a lot.
And I think what it comes down to as well is that, well, I don't hate women. I love women, right?
Yeah.
Like I think back to those videos about Hillary Clinton and some of the slogans that were adopted by Trump supporters of being like Trump that B word and like Hillary sucks but not like Monica, right? Like we wouldn't say like, oh no, I love women. I love my wife. I love my daughter who's standing right beside me. I'm thinking about those videos, right? Like I love women, but I'll grab someone by the you know what. Oh, but I can't say that in front of my daughter.
That's fascinating that you say that because like that book, this book, I'll put it up to the screen again. Down Girl by Kate Mann talks about the ways in which men are exonerated from those acts by saying, "Oh well, no, he loves women. It's
I
it's like
have
the
a daughter. I'm a feminist.
exactly right when it's not about um, and I think this is also something that we teach in MENding and also at the centers that like gender-based violence and sexual violence is not based in desire at all. It's based in the like power and utilizing power against other people and maintaining that power. Like it has nothing to do with how much you love women or love someone. It's that
Power and control
yeah
over someone as a signifier of who you are as a man.
wow yeah perfect. Oh
Lucas, if there's any men that are out there listening today, I know we've had quite a few people tuning in. What is kind of some last statements or some last words or a question or a thought that you have that you would want the men to take home with them today?
awesome. Okay. I think a question that I want to ask and then a follow up suggestion is when's the last time you've had a conversation with yourself or with people that you care about what it is to be a man and having discussions like this? When's the last time you've done that? And if it hasn't been in a while, what I want to say is that uh, if you haven't been able to have those opportunities, that we have a program for you. If you want to engage in these conversations and connect with us, we're here and we want to hear from you. We all learn from each other and we can't do this alone. So I'm excited to meet you and thank you so much for listening.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I'll sound off with saying thank you to everyone so much for tuning in today. Lucas, thank you so much for having this conversation and probably continuing this conversation. I'm sure we will see a lot more of you in the very near future, or at least another year.
I'm so thankful and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone so much for tuning in and enjoy the rest of your day.
Goodbye.